Once upon a time, all journalists were committed to the pursuit of truth. Speak truth to power without fear or favour went the famous credo. Now, according to the former editor of the Australian newspaper, Chris Mitchell, some media outlets are engaging in their own brand of cancel culture by ignoring important stories that don't fit a political narrative of their choice. Chris Mitchell joins me now to pull this apart a little more. Chris, brilliant analysis in the Australian today. You're absolutely on the money. The issue that you wrote about, and I'm interested in you talking to my viewers through your arguments, but the bullying allegations about the late Kimberley Kitching, you would think after the last 12 to 18 months of the women's issue in the Parliament, it would have had a good airing, but not so, depending on the outlet you were looking at or the paper you were reading.
Thanks for having me, Peter. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And surprisingly so, it seems to me that in some media outlets, everything women say has to be believed, but in others, only if they're progressive women. So, a certain type of woman can be abused, and apparently that's okay. It sort of strikes me that going back and looking at a couple of stories by women in the Australian, first the story by Janet Albrechtsen about Rochelle Miller's text to Alan Tudge, and then a week or so later, Shari Markson's story about, the bullying of Kimberley Kitching before she died. There was a pretty clear attempt initially by insiders on the ABC and later really across the ABC on the 7:30 report and on ABC Radio. Not so much on ABC News, but to really make sure this story didn't get an airing.
So why is that? Why are the journalist class nowadays becoming the political players that I think this story highlights in spades?
Well, look, it does keep a public poorly informed, and I was really struck on the day of the Alan Tudge story on insiders that they spoke endlessly that day about Tudge going to the backbench. A terrific education minister, I would have thought, and somebody that the coalition could have fought an election on education reforms with. They only spoke about Tudge's texts. They didn't speak about Rochelle's texts, which were published the previous day. Now, I would have thought that can only mean that they've taken an editorial decision deliberately to ignore Janet Albrechtsen's story. And there was no challenge to the story. No one ever denied these were accurate texts.
So how do you fix it?
Well, I think at the ABC, you'd probably need the board to be far more active, and probably we've got the wrong chair. I think there are many senior people inside the ABC, people who call me, who are worried about this too. There are people inside the corporation who are doing their job properly, but, that's being lost, I think, as others, particularly in current affairs, do their level best to do damage to the Morrison government wherever they can.
It's not just an Australian phenomenon. I mean, we saw this happen with the Biden laptop and the bearing collusion of a number of intelligence officials and others, the collusion with media outlets to make that story go away, to delegitimise that story. Now it's been found legitimate, but it wasn't, as it should have been, I think, a decision point for people in the lead up to that election.
100% right, Peter. It seems to me that for the New York Times now to come out and bury an admission that the story was correct all along, deep in an inside page story, is pretty scandalous. And I think a lot of mainstream media outlets have a lot of soul searching to do. That story, I thought, was pretty well handled by the New York Post. I would have thought Cole Allen and Miranda Devine had spent quite a bit of time checking the veracity of the emails. They'd spoken to people who received Hunter Biden's emails, and the story seems to be perfectly legitimate. And having come so soon after the whole Russia disinformation scandal, that furphy that somehow Donald Trump, who'd done more to hurt Putin's interests in Venezuela and the Ukraine than any prime minister or any president in a long time, that he was colluding with the Russians, to follow those 3 or 4 years of misreporting with this censorship of the Hunter Biden laptop story was a disgrace.
It is a disgrace. I look for your column every Monday, Chris Mitchell. Appreciate your time tonight.